I'm Allison, 32, and I was sitting at my sister Rebecca's extravagant wedding reception when it happened. For years, she'd belittled my career choices with that particular smile reserved for someone you pity. Tonight was the crescendo of her condescension. "Poor sis, still at that tiny firm," she announced to her table of corporate friends. I just smiled tightly, excusing myself for fresh air. 10 minutes later, her CEO approached me on the terrace. "Ma'am," he said, eyes widening in recognition. I hadn't planned this moment, but it was perfect. While I tell you how I went from humiliated bridesmaid to the most powerful person in that ballroom, drop a comment about where you're watching from and subscribe if you enjoy sweet justice served cold. Rebecca and I grew up in Newton, an affluent Boston suburb where success had a very specific definition. Our parents, Margaret and Thomas Anderson, believed in a linear path to achievement: prestigious schools, recognizable employers, and six-figure salaries by 30. Our 4-year age gap meant Rebecca, now 36, became the prototype of the Anderson success story. From kindergarten, Rebecca collected gold stars like they were Olympic medals. Her bedroom walls gradually disappeared beneath framed certificates and honor roll announcements. My parents beamed at every parent-teacher conference, basking in the glow of her conventional achievements. When I came along, I was more of a question mark. Not that I wasn't smart. I tested into the gifted program in 2nd grade, but I approached things differently. While Rebecca memorized textbooks verbatim, I was taking apart our family computer to understand how it worked. Rebecca got straight A's again, my mother would announce at dinner, while my father nodded approvingly. When it was my turn, their enthusiasm noticeably dimmed. Allison started a trading card business at recess. My mother would report with a tight smile. "Very entrepreneurial." The way she said entrepreneurial made it sound like a contagious disease. One particular memory stands out from my childhood. I was 11 when I created a solar-powered water filtration system for the science fair. It worked using materials that cost under $20, plastic bottles, charcoal, sand, and a small solar panel I salvaged from a broken garden light. My project won first place for innovation. The same year, Rebecca, 15, did a standard presentation on mitosis with perfect, store-bought poster boards. She received an A+, but no innovation award. At dinner that night, my parents focused entirely on her grade. The judges clearly didn't understand Rebecca's sophisticated approach, my father declared, completely ignoring my blue ribbon sitting on the table. When I was 10, our family vacationed at Cape Cod. While Rebecca spent the week networking with the teenage children of my father's colleagues, I noticed there was no place to rent beach equipment. By day 3, I had convinced a local shop owner to let me rent out a corner of his boardwalk space. I began renting out beach chairs and umbrellas I sourced from a wholesale supplier in town. By week's end, I had made $342. "That's cute, honey," my mother said dismissively when I showed her my earnings. But Rebecca just made a connection with the daughter of a Harvard admissions officer. That's an investment in her future. High school crystallized our differences further. Rebecca attended Westfield Academy, a prestigious private school that funneled students directly to Ivy League universities. I fought to attend Newton Public, which had an exceptional business and entrepreneurship track. "You're throwing away your potential," my father argued during that heated discussion. "The connections alone at Westfield would set you up for life." "I want to make my own connections," I replied, standing my ground for once. Family dinners became an extended highlight reel of Rebecca's achievements. Her perfect SAT scores, her acceptance to Wharton, her summer internship at Goldman Sachs. Meanwhile, my parents strained to find things to praise about my path. "Allison is exploring different options," my mother would explain awkwardly to dinner guests when the inevitable comparison arose. The Thanksgiving of my senior year remains painfully vivid. Rebecca, home from Wharton, held court at the dinner table, impressing our relatives with stories about her finance internship. When my turn came, I announced I would be attending State University's entrepreneurship program rather than applying to law school, as my parents had assumed. My father put down his fork. "Business? You need connections for business, Allison. Without the right network, You'll end up working for someone like your sister. Rebecca smiled sympathetically and patted my hand. Not everyone is cut out for the big leagues, Dad. Allison can always work for me someday when I'm running a department. I withdrew into myself after that, keeping my ambitions private. What they saw as limitation, I recognized as freedom. Without their attention, I could pursue my path without constant criticism. But the seeds of our lifelong dynamic had been firmly planted. After graduating with honors from Wharton, Rebecca landed a coveted analyst position at Blackridge Capital, a Fortune 500 financial services firm headquartered in Boston. Her starting salary was more than our father had made mid-career, a fact he mentioned at least weekly during family calls. Meanwhile, I graduated from State University with a double major in computer science and business. My graduation dinner felt like a consolation event. Well, it's a perfectly adequate school, my mother told her friends with that same tight smile. And Allison did fine. I had actually graduated summa cum laude and won the entrepreneurship department's annual innovation award, but those details somehow never made it into family conversations. While Rebecca spent her summers climbing the corporate ladder at increasingly prestigious internships, I worked at 3 different tech startups, learning how companies scaled from nothing to something. I was less interested in the prestige than in watching the mechanics of growth up close. My first job after college was at Innovatech, a small tech consulting firm with only 20 employees. When I announced this at Sunday brunch, Rebecca nearly choked on her mimosa. Innovatech? I've never even heard of them, she laughed. What's their market cap, like $2? They're private, I replied quietly. Of course they are, she smirked. Because no one would buy their stock. My parents exchanged worried glances. Honey, is this really the best use of your degree? My father asked. I have a colleague whose firm is hiring entry-level associates. The starting salary is twice what you'd make at wherever this is. I declined the connection, which became another family story about my puzzling career choices. While Rebecca bought a luxury condo in Boston's Seaport District with her signing bonus, I rented a modest 1-bedroom apartment and lived frugally. What my family didn't know was that I was saving nearly 70% of my income, building capital for my future plans. Our contrasting lifestyles became another point of contention. Rebecca drove a BMW, wore designer clothes, and took Instagram-worthy vacations. I drove a used Toyota, shopped at outlet stores, and spent my vacation days attending industry conferences and networking events. You could afford nicer things if you'd chosen a better career path, Rebecca commented during one of our monthly Sunday brunches, which had devolved into a battlefield for career updates. My annual bonus this year was probably more than your salary. I simply nodded, not mentioning that my investment portfolio was already substantial or that I was building connections with some of the most innovative minds in tech rather than the most wealthy. 3 years after graduation, I made a decision that confirmed my family's worst fears about my career judgment. I joined Cybersecure, a struggling cybersecurity firm with a brilliant founder named Megan Wright. The company had groundbreaking technology, but poor business strategy. A sinking ship? That's your big career move. Rebecca laughed during the Christmas dinner where I announced my news. She had just been promoted to senior manager, overseeing a team of 15 analysts. Sometimes you have to look beneath the surface, I replied. The only thing beneath the surface of failing companies is more failure, my father interjected. I thought we raised you with more business sense than this. What I couldn't tell them was that I had already been in discussions with Megan for months. She was a technical genius but needed a business-minded partner. While my family thought I was making another misguided career move, I was actually negotiating for equity. 6 months after joining Cybersecure, I used my savings to buy a 15% ownership stake when another investor wanted out. Within a year, I purchased another 10%. By the 3-year mark, Megan and I were equal partners, though I kept this arrangement private from my family. At the Christmas dinner 3 years before Rebecca's wedding, the argument about wasting potential reached its peak. You're 39 years old, my father told me, getting the age wrong as he often did. And what do you have to show for it? Rebecca is on track to make partner by 40. I'm 29, Dad. I corrected quietly. And I'm exactly where I want to be. Rebecca reached across the table to pat my hand. Don't worry, sis. Not everyone peaks early. Maybe your tiny firm will get acquired someday, and you can start over somewhere legitimate. I said nothing, excusing myself to help with dessert. They didn't know that earlier that week, I had used my business line of credit to buy out Megan's retiring co-founder, becoming the majority shareholder of what would soon become SecureNova. With majority control of the company, I worked with Megan to completely transform cybersecurity into SecureNova. We maintained the same physical office, a converted warehouse space that looked unimpressive from the outside, but everything else changed. First, we pivoted from general cybersecurity solutions to specialized protection for government agencies and healthcare providers, sectors with massive budgets and regulatory requirements for data protection. This focus allowed us to charge premium prices for customized solutions rather than competing with big firms on standardized packages. I deliberately kept our company's headcount small on paper by using a network of specialized contractors for project-based work. To the outside world, SecureNova appeared to be a boutique firm with fewer than 30 employees. In reality, we had over 100 people working with us consistently, but without the overhead costs of traditional employment. 9 months after our rebrand, we landed our first major contract, a 3-year security infrastructure deal with a regional hospital network. The contract value was over $4 million, instantly making the company profitable. During a family dinner celebrating Rebecca's promotion to director, she asked about my work with practiced condescension. Still at that little security shop? How many people report to you now? 2? 3? She laughed, swirling her wine. It's just me and a few developers, I replied vaguely, not mentioning that we had just signed our second government contract or that I had personally cleared 7 figures for the first time. Well, I'm overseeing 32 people now, she announced proudly. And we just closed a deal worth $50 million. Our parents beamed at her while I quietly excused myself to take a work call in the kitchen, actually a conference call with the Department of Defense about a potential security partnership. As SecureNova grew, I made a deliberate decision to keep our success private. We operated from the same unassuming office space, maintained minimal presence on social media, and declined to be featured in industry publications. This low profile served multiple purposes. It kept competitors from noticing our growth, prevented larger firms from poaching our talent, and allowed us to surprise clients with our capabilities. Your sister just got another promotion, my mother informed me during our weekly call. They're flying her first class to London next month for a global leadership conference. What's new with your situation? Nothing exciting, I replied. Just working on some new security protocols. What I didn't mention was that those protocols would eventually become SecureGuard, our revolutionary security system that would change the industry standard for healthcare data protection. As SecureNova's reputation grew within specialized circles, we began acquiring smaller competitors. First came Data Fortress, a boutique encryption firm with valuable patents. 6 months later, we purchased NetShield, adding their government contracts to our portfolio. I financed these acquisitions through a combination of company profits and strategic investors who were happy to remain silent partners. Throughout this period of explosive growth, I maintained my modest lifestyle. I upgraded from my used Toyota to a new Honda, practical and reliable, but nothing that would signal wealth. I moved to a slightly larger apartment, but in the same middle-class neighborhood. To my family, nothing appeared to have changed. When Rebecca got engaged to Bradley Williams, a vice president at Blackridge Capital, the family's excitement was overwhelming. He's on the executive track, my mother gushed during our announcement dinner. They'll probably make him CFO before he's 40. Bradley was handsome, polished, and thoroughly uninterested in what I did for a living. When obligatory small talk turned to careers, he would quickly redirect the conversation after learning I worked in tech. As wedding planning consumed the family over the next year, the divide between Rebecca's world and mine grew even wider. While she planned a 300-person wedding at Boston's exclusive Heritage Club, I was secretly negotiating the biggest deal of my career, the acquisition of CyberGuard, the security subsidiary of Blackridge Capital, Rebecca's employer. The timing was purely coincidental. Blackridge had decided to divest their security operations to focus on core financial services, and SecureNova was positioned as the perfect buyer. The negotiations were highly confidential, with only top executives at Blackridge, including CEO James Harrison, aware of the potential sale. 2 weeks before Rebecca's wedding, while she was finalizing seating charts and floral arrangements, I was reviewing the acquisition paperwork that would not only make SecureNova a major industry player, but also technically make me Bradley's boss's boss. The irony wasn't lost on me, but I kept the information strictly confidential as the deal wasn't yet finalized. The night before I flew home for wedding week, SecureGuard was nominated for the National Cybersecurity Innovation Award, the industry's highest honor. I celebrated with my team over pizza in our modest office, then packed for Boston without telling a soul in my family. Rebecca's engagement party at the Westbrook Country Club set the tone for what would be a year of increasingly uncomfortable pre-wedding events. The ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and champagne flowed freely as Boston's corporate elite mingled and congratulated the couple. I arrived in a simple black cocktail dress, having come directly from the airport after closing a major healthcare security contract. Rebecca, resplendent in designer silk, air-kissed my cheeks before pulling me toward a group of her colleagues. "This is my little sister, Allison." She introduced me to 3 impeccably dressed women. "She works at a small tech company in the city. Something with computers." She turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "These are my friends from Blackridge. They're all senior managers in investment banking." The women gave me polite but dismissive smiles before one asked, "How many people work at your company?" Before I could answer, Rebecca laughed. "Oh, it's tiny. Like a startup, but without the venture capital or growth potential." The women chuckled sympathetically while I sipped my champagne in silence. Bridesmaid dress shopping the following month was another exercise in subtle humiliation. At the exclusive bridal boutique, Rebecca insisted on paying for everyone's dresses, a seemingly generous gesture that allowed her to repeatedly mention the 5-figure price tag. "Are you sure you're comfortable with this silhouette, Allison?" she asked as I tried on the selected dress. "I know you're used to more budget-friendly clothing. These are handmade Italian silk." "The dress is fine, Rebecca," I replied, fighting to keep my voice even. "I just want to make sure you'll be comfortable spending a whole day in something so expensive," she continued, loud enough for the other bridesmaids to hear. "It probably costs more than your monthly rent." She wasn't wrong. The dress did cost more than my rent. What she didn't know was that I could have purchased the entire bridal boutique if I'd wanted to. The bachelorette weekend in Napa Valley pushed me to my limit. Rebecca had booked a private villa and arranged exclusive tastings at prestigious wineries. During our second night, after several glasses of wine, the conversation turned to careers. "I just don't understand people who settle for mediocrity," one of Rebecca's corporate friends said, not looking directly at me but making her target clear. "Like, why wouldn't you want to maximize your potential?" "Not everyone has the drive to compete at the highest levels," Rebecca replied, giving me that pitying look I'd grown to despise. "Some people prefer comfort over achievement." I excused myself to make a phone call, actually to approve the preliminary terms for the CyberGuard acquisition. The deal was progressing faster than expected, with final signatures potentially happening the week of the wedding. As the wedding approached, my role as supportive sister became increasingly difficult. At every turn, Rebecca found ways to highlight the contrast between her successful life and my supposedly disappointing one. 3 days before the wedding, I received an urgent call from my COO about CyberGuard. Blackridge wanted to accelerate the closing timeline. They needed the deal completed before the end of the quarter. I agreed to the compressed schedule, not realizing it would coincide exactly with wedding activities. The rehearsal dinner at an upscale steakhouse became another showcase for Rebecca's idea of success. During her toast, she raised her glass and looked directly at me. "To different paths in life," she said with a smile that appeared genuine to everyone but me. "Some of us climb mountains, others take scenic routes. Both have their charms." Later that evening, Bradley cornered me by the bar, loosened by several scotches. "You know," he said in what he probably thought was a helpful tone, "I could put in a word for you at Blackridge. Entry-level stuff, but it would be a huge step up from your current situation. Rebecca worries about you. Thank you, but I'm happy where I am, I replied. He patted my shoulder condescendingly. That's the problem with your generation.
No ambition.
But the offer stands. Family helps family. Little did he know that within 48 hours, I would technically be acquiring part of his company. Back at my hotel room that night, I signed the preliminary acquisition papers that had been couriered over. The final signatures would happen tomorrow morning between the bridal brunch and hair appointments. The morning of the wedding arrived with a flurry of activity. Between having my makeup done and helping Rebecca into her dress, I slipped away for 20 minutes to a conference room the hotel had arranged for me. There, I met with lawyers to complete the paperwork, making Secure Nova the official owner of CyberGuard, effectively placing me in control of Blackridge's entire security infrastructure. No one in the bridal party noticed my brief absence, and I returned in time to help Rebecca with her veil, the weight of what I'd just accomplished hidden behind my bridesmaid's smile. The bridal suite at the Heritage Club buzzed with activity as makeup artists and hairstylists transformed 6 bridesmaids and one increasingly nervous bride. Rebecca sat in a throne-like chair in the center of the room, directing the proceedings like a general commanding troops. Allison, your hair needs more volume, she called out, studying my reflection in the mirror. You look too corporate casual. One of her sorority sisters snickered. I said nothing, allowing the hairstylist to add another pound of hairspray to my already stiff updo. As we helped Rebecca into her custom Vera Wang gown, she couldn't resist another dig. I noticed you drove yourself this morning. Still have that little Honda? It gets me where I need to go, I replied neutrally. Brad and I are getting a Mercedes S-Class as a wedding present to ourselves, she announced to the room. His signing bonus this year was astronomical. A bridesmaid I barely knew chimed in. Didn't I hear you're still in that studio apartment, Allison? In Somerville. 1 bedroom in Cambridge. I corrected quietly. Rebecca laughed. Could you imagine? 32 and still living like a college student. She turned to adjust her veil. Some people just have different priorities, I guess. I focused on breathing slowly, reminding myself that in a few hours, this would all be over. Both the wedding and the need to maintain my facade. The ceremony itself was flawless, as expected from a bride who had micromanaged every detail. I stood dutifully beside Rebecca, genuinely happy for her despite everything. Whatever our differences, she was still my sister, and she looked truly joyful as she exchanged vows with Bradley. The real tension began during the cocktail hour following the ceremony. Rebecca strategically seated me at the family table, directly across from James Harrison, CEO of Blackridge Capital, and his wife. My parents beamed at this placement, assuming it was Rebecca's way of helping me network with important people. Our Allison works in computers too, my mother told Harrison proudly, clearly hoping to facilitate a connection. Harrison nodded politely. Is that so? What firm? A small security company, I replied vaguely. Nothing you would have heard of. Allison has always preferred the intimate workplace environment, Rebecca interjected as she stopped by our table. While some of us thrive under pressure, others prefer simpler challenges. Harrison smiled noncommittally and turned to speak with my father about golf. The true humiliation came during dinner. Rebecca, making her rounds to each table, stopped at ours with Bradley in tow. She was slightly intoxicated on champagne and success, her filter looser than usual. James, I hope my little sister hasn't been boring you with tech talk, she laughed. She's always been the family underachiever. My mother gasped softly. Rebecca, that's not. Oh, Mom, I'm just teasing, Rebecca said, though her eyes remained sharp. She turned to Harrison. But seriously, you should see her little operation compared to our cybersecurity division. It's like comparing a lemonade stand to the New York Stock Exchange. Bradley laughed too loudly, placing his hand on Harrison's shoulder.
Family, right?
Can't choose, Rebecca wasn't finished. She raised her voice slightly, ensuring nearby tables could hear. Poor sis, still at that tiny firm while I'm heading a department of 50 people. She turned to me with fake sympathy. But hey, not everyone can handle the big leagues. Several of her colleagues from neighboring tables chuckled. I felt my cheeks burning as Harrison glanced at me with new interest. "What's your company called?" he asked. Before I could answer, Rebecca interjected. "It's not important. Just a little local operation." She tugged Bradley's arm. "We should greet the Williamsons." As they walked away, I quietly excused myself, needing air and distance. The weight of years of dismissal and condescension pressed on my chest as I made my way to the terrace, away from the reception's noise and judgment. Outside in the cool evening air, I checked my phone to find 3 messages from my office confirming that the CyberGuard acquisition was complete. All signatures had been processed, and the press release was scheduled for Monday morning, well after Rebecca's honeymoon departure. I leaned against the stone balustrade, taking deep breaths and reminding myself that none of this mattered. I had built something valuable on my own terms. Rebecca's opinion couldn't change that reality. 10 minutes of solitude was all I was granted before the terrace door opened behind me. The heavy glass door to the terrace clicked shut as I quickly composed myself, wiping away the single tear that had escaped. I didn't turn around, hoping whoever had come outside would respect my privacy and find another spot for their break from the reception. "Beautiful evening," came a deep voice as James Harrison stepped up to the balustrade a respectful distance away, pulling a cigar case from his inner pocket. "Mind if I indulge? My wife has forbidden these in her presence since our daughter was born." "It's a free terrace," I replied with a small smile, trying to recover my professional demeanor. Harrison clipped the end of his cigar, his movements precise and practiced. Sometimes these events require a moment of escape, even for those of us who navigate boardrooms for a living. He didn't seem to recognize me as the bridesmaid from his table, the sister of the bride, and I didn't correct him. In the dim terrace lighting, with my face turned partially away, I was just another wedding guest seeking solitude. "Are you a friend of Rebecca's or Bradley's?" he asked conversationally as he lit his cigar. "Family," I replied vaguely. "You," Bradley sighed. "Professional connection." He drew on his cigar thoughtfully. "I'm James, by the way." "Allison," I replied, not offering my last name. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment before he spoke again. "You're in tech, if I recall from dinner?" "Security, was it?" I nodded, deciding to engage rather than withdraw. "Cybersecurity. Specialized solutions for healthcare and government sectors." His interest visibly increased. "Interesting space right now. We've been having significant concerns about our internal security infrastructure at Blackridge. The landscape keeps changing faster than traditional corporate structures can adapt." "That's precisely the problem with large corporate security divisions," I replied, forgetting momentarily who I was speaking with. "They're built to comply with regulations rather than to innovate ahead of threats." Rather than being offended, Harrison laughed.
Exactly right.
"Our cybersecurity division is full of people who know the right boxes to check, but lack the creativity to anticipate what's coming. We're actually in the process of restructuring our entire approach." The irony of this conversation was not lost on me, but I maintained my neutral expression. "Smart move. The threat landscape evolves weekly. There's this promising company called SecureNova that's been doing remarkable work in adaptive security protocols," Harrison continued, completely unaware he was speaking to its owner. "Their healthcare security framework is revolutionary. We're looking closely at their methodologies." My heart skipped a beat at hearing my company's name from his lips. "I'm familiar with their work," I managed to say evenly. "Are you?" "Their approach to quantum-resistant encryption is years ahead of the industry. We've been trying to get a meeting with their leadership team for months." He shook his head. "Very private operation. Brilliant strategy, really. Creating scarcity increases value." I couldn't help myself. Their multi-layered authentication system is what really sets them apart. The proprietary algorithm adapts to behavioral patterns in real time. Harrison turned to face me fully, his cigar temporarily forgotten. "You seem to know a lot about their technical specifications." "I should," I replied carefully. "I designed that system." His expression shifted from casual interest to intense focus. "You work for SecureNova?" The moment had arrived without my planning it. After years of diminishment and dismissal, standing at my sister's wedding where I'd been openly mocked minutes earlier, the truth emerged naturally. "I don't work for Secure Nova," I said quietly. "I own it." Harrison's cigar nearly fell from his fingers. "You're Allison Anderson, CEO of Secure Nova." I nodded once. "But that would mean," he started, his mind clearly racing to connect the dots.
Yes.
"As of 9:30 this morning, my company acquired CyberGuard, your security subsidiary." I extended my hand professionally. "I believe that makes us business partners." "Ma'am," he said, the formality slipping out automatically as his recognition solidified. His eyes widened in genuine shock. "Why not?" I smiled. "I actually own the company." Harrison stared at me for a long moment before letting out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be damned." He looked back toward the reception, then at me again. "Does your sister know?" "No one in my family knows the true scope of my company," I replied. "They believe I work at a small, struggling firm with no growth potential. Secure Nova is valued at what now? $300 million? With that healthcare contract you just landed with Memorial Systems? 320 after this morning's acquisition," I corrected gently. Harrison shook his head in disbelief. "And you're the majority shareholder?" 67%, I confirmed. He took a long draw on his cigar, processing this information. "I've been trying to schedule a meeting with you for months. Your gatekeeper is formidable." "Megan takes her job seriously," I replied, smiling at the thought of my technical co-founder who handled most external communications precisely to keep me anonymous. "And now I find you at my VP's wedding, being treated like—" He trailed off, diplomatically not finishing the sentence. "Like someone who doesn't matter," I completed for him. Perception and reality often diverge. Harrison studied me with newfound respect. "We have a lot to discuss about the integration of CyberGuard's operations. I have serious concerns about vulnerabilities in our current system." For the next 20 minutes, we talked shop discussing security architecture and integration strategies. He explained Blackridge's current challenges, and I outlined how Secure Nova's protocols could address them. It was the most honest professional conversation I'd had all weekend. "Your SecureGuard protocol, it's revolutionary," he said. "The adaptive authentication alone could save financial institutions billions in fraud prevention." "That's the idea," I replied. "Security shouldn't be static when threats are dynamic." As our conversation concluded, Harrison extinguished his cigar. "We should head back inside before we're missed. But I'd like to continue this conversation in a more formal setting next week." "My office or yours?" I asked. "Yours," he replied without hesitation. "I want to see this operation you've built." As we walked back toward the reception, he paused at the door. "Ms. Anderson, I have to ask, why keep your success so private, even from family?" I considered the question carefully. When people underestimate you, they reveal who they truly are. I've learned a lot about character by staying underestimated. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. "A unique perspective. In my experience, power is something to be displayed." "Different approaches for different goals," I replied. "My company's privacy has been strategically valuable. Until tonight," he noted. "Some revelations can't be avoided," I acknowledged as he opened the door. We stepped back into the reception, where everything looked exactly the same but felt entirely different. As we re-entered the reception, Harrison's demeanor toward me had transformed completely. Where before there had been polite disinterest, now there was deferential respect. He guided me back to our table with a hand formally extended toward my chair. "Ms. Anderson, I cannot express how pleased I am that we've finally connected," he said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Blackridge is fortunate to have Secure Nova managing our security infrastructure moving forward." My mother's eyes widened at his tone, while my father stopped mid-sip of his whiskey. Before they could ask questions, Rebecca appeared at our table, champagne glass in hand and Bradley trailing behind her. "James, I see you've been stuck with family duty," she laughed, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I hope Allison hasn't been boring you with her little computer stories." Harrison straightened, subtly removing her hand from his shoulder. On the contrary, MS. Anderson has been explaining some fascinating aspects of quantum encryption that will be revolutionary for Blackridge's security protocols. Rebecca's smile faltered slightly. Allison? Quantum what? Your sister was just modestly declining to take credit for what might be the most significant security innovation in financial services this decade, Harrison continued. The SecureGuard protocol is brilliant work. Bradley stepped forward, confusion evident on his face. SecureGuard? That's the system our IT department has been raving about. But that's developed by... His voice trailed off as he looked at me with new uncertainty. Harrison turned to address the small crowd that had gathered around us. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to acknowledge the remarkable Ms. Allison Anderson, CEO of SecureNova, who has just executed one of the most strategic acquisitions in the cybersecurity sector this year. A murmur rippled through the nearby guests. Rebecca's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. As of this morning, Harrison continued, SecureNova now controls the security infrastructure for all Blackridge capital operations through their acquisition of our CyberGuard division. A masterful business move that our board unanimously approved. My parents stared at me in shock while Rebecca's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror. Allison, my father finally managed. You acquired a division of Blackridge? It was a natural expansion opportunity, I replied calmly, using the same measured tone I employed in board meetings. SecureNova specializes in exactly the security solutions that Blackridge needs. But your tiny firm, Rebecca sputtered. The small operation you run is not so small, I completed for her. We've maintained a deliberately low profile while growing strategically. Bradley, whose career instincts were sharper than his social awareness, quickly adjusted his approach. Allison, this is wonderful news. We should discuss potential synergies across other Blackridge divisions. My team will be in touch, I replied neutrally. Rebecca grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in with unexpected strength.
We need to talk. Now.
She pulled me away from the table toward the bridal suite, her smile fixed in place for the benefit of watching guests. Once inside the empty room, she slammed the door behind us. What the hell was that? She demanded, her voice shaking. You humiliated me in front of my boss, in front of everyone. I answered questions about my company. I replied evenly. Just as I've been doing all night. Don't play innocent. You deliberately blindsided me at my own wedding. All these years pretending to be some struggling nobody, and suddenly you're what, some tech mogul? James Harrison was practically genuflecting before you. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. I never lied about my work. You simply assumed my company was insignificant because it didn't match your definition of success. How was I supposed to know? You drive a Honda and live in a one-bedroom apartment. And you decided that meant I was failing, I pointed out, without ever asking about my business or showing any genuine interest in my path. Rebecca paced the room, her wedding gown swishing angrily around her. So, this was all some elaborate revenge scheme? Waiting until my wedding to reveal you've secretly been successful all along. The timing is coincidental, I said truthfully. The acquisition was scheduled to be announced Monday. I had no idea Harrison would be seated at our table, or that you would choose tonight to mock my career so publicly. She stopped pacing, her expression shifting from anger to something more complex. How big is SecureNova, really? We employ over 200 people across 3 offices. Our valuation after today's acquisition is approximately $320 million. Rebecca sank into a nearby chair, careful of her dress. And you own it? All of it. 67%. I corrected. My technical co-founder owns 20%, and the remaining shares are distributed among key executives. All this time, she whispered, more to herself than to me. All those family dinners where I was so condescending. Yes, I said simply. Why didn't you ever say anything? Set the record straight. I considered the question seriously. At first, because the company was still growing and I didn't want to make promises I couldn't keep. Then, as we became successful, I realized how revealing your true perception of me had been. You never saw value in my path because it didn't look like yours. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. I thought I was helping you, she finally said, though her tone lacked conviction. Trying to motivate you to aim higher. By belittling me? She had the grace to look ashamed. I didn't see it that way. No, I agreed. You didn't see me at all. The door opened and our mother entered, her expression a mixture of confusion and awe. There you are. Everyone's asking questions about Allison's company and this acquisition. What's going on? Rebecca and I exchanged a long look, years of sisterly competition hanging in the balance. Mom, Rebecca said finally, I think we all need to listen to what Allison has to say. Really listen for once. It was the first genuine moment of respect my sister had shown me in years, and despite everything, it mattered. Hashtag part 9, Aftermath and Reconciliation. Monday morning arrived with a formal press release announcing SecureNova's acquisition of CyberGuard. The business media immediately picked up the story, with headlines highlighting the unexpected nature of the deal and profiling me as the stealth CEO who had built a cybersecurity powerhouse in near-complete anonymity. My phone began ringing at 6:30 a.m. and didn't stop. Industry analysts, journalists, and suddenly interested venture capitalists all wanted a piece of the company that had managed to grow to hundreds of millions in valuation without the usual Silicon Valley hype machine. The most difficult call came from my father at 7:15. Allison, he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. Your mother and we've been reading about your company online. $300 million? How is this possible? One client at a time, Dad, I replied, standing in my kitchen brewing coffee. The same way any business grows. But why didn't you tell us? All these years, we thought. He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. You thought I was failing. I completed for him. Despite evidence to the contrary, you were so convinced that my path was wrong that you never actually looked at where it was leading. There was a long pause. We were wrong, he finally said, the words clearly difficult for him. Your mother and we had a very narrow view of success. We owe you an apology. It was the first time I could remember my father admitting he was wrong about anything. Thank you, I said simply. That means a lot. Can we take you to dinner when Rebecca returns from her honeymoon? As a family, there's clearly a lot we need to learn about your life. I agreed, feeling a weight lifting that I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for so long. The most surprising call came 2 weeks later, after Rebecca and Bradley returned from their honeymoon in Bali. She asked to meet for lunch, just the two of us. We met at a quiet restaurant halfway between her Seaport office and my Cambridge headquarters. The initial moments were awkward, both of us unsure how to navigate our new reality. So, she finally said after we'd ordered, my little sister is a tech mogul with a company worth more than Brad will make in his entire career. I smiled slightly. Success comes in different forms. That's just it, Rebecca said, setting down her water glass with unexpected force. I don't think I ever understood that. Not really. She looked at me directly. I've spent 2 weeks thinking about how I've treated you over the years, and I'm ashamed, Allison. Truly ashamed. The rawness of her admission caught me off guard. We were raised with a very specific definition of achievement. I offered. That's no excuse, she countered. I was insecure and turned that into judgment. Every time you chose a different path, it threatened my certainty that my way was the only right way. And mine was just a different approach, not a lesser one, I added. More than different, she acknowledged. In many ways, braver. I followed a prescribed path with clear metrics for success. You built something from nothing, taking real risks along the way. We talked for nearly 3 hours, peeling back layers of competition and miscommunication that had defined our relationship for decades. For the first time, Rebecca asked genuine questions about my company, my vision, and my journey, and actually listened to the answers. The hardest part to admit, she confessed over coffee, is that part of me always suspected you were capable of extraordinary things. It was easier to dismiss you than to question my own choices. We all have different strengths, I replied. Your corporate rise is impressive in its own right. She laughed without humor. My impressive career now has me reporting to a division head, who reports to a VP, who reports to Bradley, who reports to Harrison, who clearly views you as a peer or superior. She shook her head. The irony isn't lost on me. Success isn't a zero-sum game, I reminded her. Your path can still be right for you. Maybe, she said thoughtfully. Or maybe it's time I learned from my little sister about defining success on my own terms. The following Thanksgiving marked a turning point in our family dynamics. For the first time, my parents asked detailed questions about my business strategy and listened with genuine interest to my responses. My father, who had dismissed my entrepreneurial ventures for years, now sought my advice on his investment portfolio. Rebecca arrived last, having driven separately from Bradley, who had a work emergency. She handed me a wrapped package as soon as she walked in. Early Christmas, she explained with uncharacteristic nervousness. Inside was a framed photograph I hadn't seen in over 20 years, me at 10 years old, standing proudly behind my first lemonade stand, a crude sign advertising Allie's Refreshments, visible in the background. I remember my father taking the picture, but had never seen it printed. I found it in Mom's old albums, Rebecca explained. It reminded me that you always knew who you were, even when none of us could see it. The gesture was simple but profound, an acknowledgement of my path and an apology for having dismissed it for so long. By the one-year anniversary of Rebecca's wedding, our relationship had transformed into something I wouldn't have thought possible. The competitive edge had dulled, replaced by a genuine interest in each other's lives and choices. When Rebecca decided to leave Blackridge to start her own financial consulting firm, I was the first person she called for advice. I've spent my entire career following someone else's blueprint, she told me over dinner, celebrating her new venture. It's time I drew my own. Entrepreneurship isn't easy, I warned her, though I couldn't hide my support. So my extremely successful sister keeps telling me, she replied with a smile. Fortunately, I have a pretty good mentor. Looking back now, I realize that the most valuable outcome of my revelation wasn't proving my worth to my family. It was finally being seen for who I truly am, not as a failure who couldn't compete in the real world, but as someone who had the courage to define success on her own terms. The truth is, success rarely follows a straight line or adheres to external expectations. The most meaningful achievements often come from staying true to your vision, even when those closest to you can't see it yet. Sometimes the people who underestimate you the most are the ones who should know you best, but that doesn't mean you have to accept their definition of your worth. Have you ever been underestimated by family or friends, only to prove them wrong in the end? Or are you currently walking a path others don't understand or respect? Share your story in the comments below. And if this tale of sweet corporate justice brought you satisfaction, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and defining success on your own terms. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the quietest paths lead to the most spectacular views.